You quoted a book and said it's just babble being batted back and forth. These just words that mean nothing, and it should not be the uncomfortable ones that we're afraid of, but the ones that really don't move the needle.
Well, there's gold in them thar uncomfortable hills.
Hello and welcome to episode 29 of the Life Insurance Academy podcast. I'm your host, Austin Lope-Severo, and I'm here with Chris Ball, Zach McElwain, and Roger Short. The LIA podcast takes you into the conversations of top producing life insurance agents so that you can level up your business. For episode notes and resources, visit liapodcast.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Life Insure Acad. Also, make sure you've subscribed to our text notifications for episode releases and agent resources. All you have to do is send the letters LIA to the number 82149. That's 82149, and the message with the letters LIA. Well, thanks for joining us. We have a great episode for you today with an incredible special guest, Susan Scott. Susan is a best-selling author of books Fierce Conversations and Fierce Leadership. She founded Fierce Inc. after 13 years leading CEO think tanks and more than 10,000 hours of conversations with senior executives. Now, she's known for her bold yet practical approach to executive coaching and leadership development, and she's been challenging people to say the things that are so hard to say for over 2 decades. She has clientele such as Crate & Barrel, Costco, New York Life, AT&T, Coca-Cola, Aveda, Verizon, and countless others. We're so excited to have her with us today as we discuss the fierce conversations that we as agents must be having to be successful in this industry. Also, stick around to the end as we'll be sharing some ways that you can win Susan's book and a special announcement from Susan about an exciting project that she's working on and coming to the world soon. So, Susan, welcome to the podcast. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Austin. I appreciate the invitation.
Chris, now you are kind of our connection to Susan in a way. Will you talk about how we even got to this point where she's on our podcast?
I know, man. I know.
We're so excited you're here.
Yes, absolutely.
Go on.
No, well, it's gonna get a little rich here. I was gonna say, like, I'm a little nervous. I got the butterflies, the Eminem rap battle feelings, all that stuff, and part of this is because Susan's book, Fierce Conversations, has had such an impact on my life personally. We had when I emailed Susan. Susan, you tell them the line that stood out to you, if you don't mind.
Well, now I don't. It was something about being a people pleaser. Was that it?
Yes. Yeah. I said, as a recovering people pleaser.
And I said, if I could give everybody this gift, it would be that you really wouldn't care what other people think.
That's great.
It's controversial. But
hey. But it's very true. And, as a recovering people pleaser, I remember a very important conversation when I first got into this industry. And I had been at a convention, which was a personal growth step for me to even go. There was a group of people talking, and they looked engaging, and I didn't know them, and I thought, well, I'm going to go up and I was challenged before to associate with people, so I'm going to go associate with people, and sat down and talked and listened, and then the leader started to ask me some very pointed questions, and very direct questions, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't have sat at this table. But really challenging, and 30 minutes into the conversation, I was very emotional. Like, I was weeping. That's to these guys, that's not surprising, but I was, and because it had gotten to the core of who I was and what I was trying to accomplish, and he had said to me, "Now, Chris, what we just practiced was interrogating reality. Have you ever read Fierce Conversations?" And I said, "No, I haven't." And he recommended the book, and I devoured it. And so first, Susan, thank you so much for that, what you offered out into the world, and it's making an impact. So it really impacted me.
Chris, I remember when you when you first sent the email. I didn't even know you sent it. But,
oh, yeah.
But immediately, it was just a random text message. Susan Scott's going to come on the podcast. She responded. She actually responded to my email. It was like a kid getting a new 10-speed bike for Christmas.
Yes, it was.
You guys, it's just me. It's just me. No big deal.
It was so cool to see how excited he was when you had responded to him. It's like, wow.
And it's because of the impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because of what you teach and the impact it's had on his personal life, his business life. I mean, it's had a huge impact on him. And then, that permeates. He starts having conversations with us of, hey, you need to check this out. And he's used us booking conferences and had quoted it on calls. And, so it's definitely been a part of our culture here of this fierce conversations. And even preparing for this, we all dove into the book. We started listening to more and continuously
continuously.
Yeah. You're the author here, Susan. I'm sure you're great with words. But
you're making a really important point that I want to just sort of second. I think of this as fierce for life. It isn't just a set of tools that you keep in your pocket and pull out on special occasions. It truly is a way of life. And even though that book is focused primarily on in your career, the business world, I get emails from people from all over the world saying, I just had a great conversation with my partner, my spouse, my child, my parent, the one that I'd been putting off for a long, long time and was nervous about it. And it went so well, I can't believe it. And that means a great deal to me because it truly is a way of life.
Can I ask you, how did you come up with this fierce? Like, when did you become aware of a process and this idea of fierce conversations?
Well, I'll try to condense this.
Okay.
At the time, and I know you probably recall this from reading the book, at the time that I read Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, I had been leading these think tanks, working with CEOs, having all of these conversations. And I would have them one-to-one with them once a month. And then each of my two groups would spend a whole day together to help one another on their most pressing issues. So many conversations. And in The Sun Also Rises, a character is asked, how did you go bankrupt? And he answers, gradually, then suddenly.
Then suddenly, yes.
Yeah, and I had this, I call them apostrophes because my niece called me when she was really little and she said, I've had an apostrophe. She meant an epiphany, but I love it. The idea of having apostrophe. I had an apostrophe that our careers and our companies and our relationships and indeed our very lives succeed or flatline or fail gradually, then suddenly, one conversation at a time. And when I thought back to, when things were going great with the CEOs and their companies, how'd they get there? Well, they got there one successful conversation at a time, within the company or with their clients or whatever. When they were not doing so well, how did they get to that place? Well, one missing or failed conversation at a time. And when we talked about, well, what's the next step? It almost always involved a conversation. I need to talk with so-and-so. I need to have a meeting with my team about this, whatever. And the same thing when the whole group would spend the day together, it was all about the conversation. And then, just so many pieces began to fall into place. And my peers around the world, they heard of how successful the CEOs in my group, and I had everything from software to coffee to retail to, you name it. It was a really diverse group of fascinating people. And I had this 50-yard line seat on their lives, but they were doing really, really well. Sometimes when they were interviewed, they talk about these conversations that they were having. And so my peers were saying, what are you doing? What are you, and I said, I'm happy to share it with you. Next thing I knew, I was traveling all over the world, sharing this.
Wow.
And the response was so wholehearted. Clearly I wasn't the only person who longed for conversations that were much more meaningful. I'm an introvert. Chris, I can relate to you.
You're an introvert? I would have never guessed that.
Either.
Social distancing I've been practicing that my entire life. So this is fine with me. but so I don't want more conversations. I don't want more meetings. I want fewer conversations and fewer meetings that get the job done.
That's great.
And
That's
so
great.
it was written from this sort of heart place of longing for more meaningful conversations, but also very practical. I mean, in the world of CEOs, you got to make things happen. You have to produce results. So it was, well, how do we do that? One conversation at a time.
It's interesting, I believe it was in your TED Talk, you said, without all these people, we'd all be in the jungle trying to figure out how to eat
rub
something.
2 sticks together, yeah.
Rub 2 sticks together, because all the companies that you work with make things, they do things, they're producing all the goods and services that we consume. Yet all these same companies are having these same issues internally, and they're having these same struggles. Yet this is where the innovation that changes the world comes from. Your one comment, and I think it might have been in your book, when you said, it's important that when you come into a meeting that you have the outline, everybody puts down all of their things, and just be attentive to one another, even the people that like to take notes. And I'm one of those persons, and I am so guilty of that myself. And just to have, hey, let's pause here for a moment and let's hear each other for what is really happening. And regardless of whether you're a single agent that's listening to this podcast today and you're having challenges communicating with the group you're working with, or you're an agency manager or an agency owner trying to communicate with maybe a team of a staff that's supporting a group of agents, or whether you're communicating to your agent field force that are operating as independent contractors. They're really independently contracted agents working with your organization, but they follow the drumbeat, the heartbeat, the message, and you're trying to communicate with them and move an organization. These challenges are happening at the individual level, and they're happening at the levels of companies that change the world, that make the technology on the platforms that we're utilizing today for this very podcast. So it was so refreshing to know we're not in this alone. And the fact that your voice and your message resonated so well around the world, that your whole company and mission and life's work has spawned out of that, has just been absolutely amazing. So it's so refreshing. Thank you for your gift to the world.
Thank you, Roger, for saying that. And honestly, it really is. It's all about the conversation. All of those companies, they would say, the CEOs would say to me, well, we are very unique. Our industry is very unique. And so our issues are complicated and complex and very unique. And they weren't.
Isn't that
they
something?
were the same issues that everybody has. I mean, they all come down to our conversations with ourselves, with our coworkers, with our boss, with our direct reports, with our customers, prospective customers, with our family. I mean, it all comes down to the conversation. And, you guys, I want to say, and I shared this to you earlier before we started recording, I listened to 2 of your podcasts, and they're awesome. I mean, they're so good. I just want to build on what you've already offered out there. It's really, really good stuff. And you talk so much about relationship and establishing trust, and that relationship is so important. And one of the most important ideas within Fierce Conversations is that it actually came from a Yorkshire poet named David White, who says, the young man who's newly married is often frustrated and perplexed and even irritated because this lovely person with whom he hopes to spend the rest of his life insists on appearing before his face on a regular basis, wanting to talk yet again about the thing they just talked about last weekend. Last night is always the quality of the relationship, and he wonders, why are we having this conversation again? And eventually, if he's paying attention, it dawns on him, this ongoing, robust conversation that I have been having with my wife is not about the relationship. The conversation is
the relationship.
Yeah. When we were preparing for this, I was on vacation with my now fiance, and
yes, congratulations! Just this past weekend.
Yeah, just this past weekend, and we were listening to another podcast you were on where you discussed that, and we both looked at each other and was like, this is so good. And we were able to spend probably 20 minutes discussion just on that idea.
I'm so glad.
And so these conversations are important.
He may not be engaged if it wasn't for you, Susan. It might be another month or two.
Well, invite me to the party.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, I think if the people that are listening to this, if they sort of sense that there might be something to this idea, that the conversation is the relationship, then if the conversation stops, well, you can do the math. Or if you and I add yet another topic to the things we're uncomfortable talking about, because it would wreck another weekend or whatever, then all of the possibilities for that relationship become smaller until one day I realize I am making myself quite small. I am behaving as if I'm just a space around my shoes, engaged in yet another 3-minute conversation that is so empty of meaning it crackles. So the conversation with you go into someone's home, that conversation is all about beginning a relationship with them that hopefully will be long-term and mutually rewarding.
As you say that, though, I want to talk about implementation a little bit. That I had an epiphany.
An apostrophe.
That's what I meant.
Or
at least a semicolon, right?
Point, yeah.
A semicolon and an apostrophe. In that conversation of interrogating reality, and I started to go into homes, and I began my own process of what this means. I would feel super comfortable relating to people. There's a piece of me. I'll make fun of my mom a little bit because I love her. My mom can sit in a movie theater and we'll be watching, Empire Strikes back in the day, something like that, and you'd see Luke Skywalker get his hand cut off. Spoiler alert. And I'm not joking, Susan. She would look at me and say, "Can you imagine? Can you imagine?" I'm like, "Mom, this has never happened. It's not a real thing." Like her empathy is so strong, and I inherited that. So I would empathize with clients and connect with them deeply, but I was never challenging. So I began this process of what I called emotional excavation, Yeah. And as I was doing that, I started to understand the importance of like stepping out of my comfort zone a little bit. You talk about it, about being brave. So can you talk a little bit about this idea of being brave and the importance of having a process of engagement into conversations that really matter, like with a client?
Right. I have so much to say.
It's a big question.
That's a big question for sure.
I know. A couple of things. One is I continue to be so saddened, and I don't know why I continue to be surprised, but I continue to be surprised at how afraid people are of saying certain things or asking certain questions, and they're afraid of what the other person is, how the other person is going to react or whatever. And I always think of Woody Allen, who said, "I'm not afraid of death. I just don't want to be in the room when it happens." and I think we think, well, it's that person. They won't like this, blah, 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 blah. And so we withhold what we're really wanting to say or what we're thinking or feeling. And we're careful. And I think a careful conversation is almost always a failed conversation because it merely postponed the conversation that truly wants and needs to take place. But I want to circle back to this thing about emotion.
Yeah.
Several years ago, a Princeton psychologist named Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for Economics. Now that's weird right there. Economics awarded the Nobel Prize to a psychologist.
Oh yeah.
What?
Interesting.
Because of his what he found, and since then, several other people have come up with the exact same result. In his studies, he absolutely proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that human beings, and that'd be you and me, make decisions and act on them first for emotional reasons, second for rational reasons. So if I just engage your head, but I don't engage your heart, or I don't
Move us.
evoke some kind of emotion in you, then we're probably not really going anywhere interesting for either one of us. And I mean, it starts, you guys were talking, you told some wonderful stories. I love the story about, the walking into somebody's kitchen and there are all these heirloom tomatoes there and say, wow, those tomatoes are fantastic. Or I couldn't help but notice your garden, or that looks like that's something that's really important to you. Was that your husband? Yes, it was, and everything. And I think I'm trying to put myself in the place of an agent walking up to the door, and I might say something like, thank you so much for inviting me here, or meeting with me. I really want to understand and resolve any goals that you have, any concerns that you have. And I just got to tell you, your garden has blown my socks off. It is so beautiful. And Zach, it's really funny, Zach, you are the only person in all of the Zoom meetings I have had, which would be in the hundreds by now, who has said, is that a boar on the wall behind you? And I would have said, yeah, it's actually a warthog. And you would say, this is unusual. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And I would tell you about my trips to Kenya and why I have this warthog on my wall. So it's so interesting to me that there's something right in our faces sometimes that we don't see or don't comment on. But I know that if I walked in and I saw a warthog on somebody's wall, I would say, that I've never seen this before. Tell me about your warthog. Is that a warthog? And then we go somewhere. Or if you came to my house, you notice my dogs. And we would talk about dogs for a little while, and we would have bonded, and you'd show me a picture of your dog or whatever. And so that is really important. You don't want to spend a whole lot of time there. You don't want to force it. You don't want to say, oh, are those, tell me about your, that picture over there, or this or that. Because sometimes we're very suspicious when somebody shows up at the house, especially if we didn't make an appointment and they just knock on the door. And we think, oh my God, this person's going to try to sell me something, and I'm not really ready for that. I'm not in the mood for that. My house is a mess right now. I don't have any makeup on. I don't And so whatever you do point out has to be absolutely genuine. You're genuinely struck by something. But I think to start out by saying, I definitely want to address the topics that you'd like to discuss today. And first, can I just ask, is that a warthog on your wall, or whatever it is? Can I just tell you, those are the most gorgeous tomatoes I've ever seen in my life, or those sunflowers, or all the examples that you guys gave. And that's really important. Just don't overdo it, because we know what you're doing.
Yeah, Susan, I know you talk about this being a skill set. And for me, I came into this business, and some of the listeners have heard on other podcasts, I'm a pretty big introvert. But so I literally would go to the store, and my challenge was, I knew I could do it because I had the drive and the motivation, but literally I would go to McAllister's Deli, and before I got my food order, I would try to find out as much as I could about that person behind the counter, or if I'm checking out at the grocery store, before I would have to pay, I'm trying to find out, and I had to develop that, and that wasn't in it. Like, being an agent coming into this, it was very surface level. It was very here for business. There was no relationship, and it was all practical. It had to be logical. It made sense. That emotional part, I'm a very guarded person, so that really wasn't there for me. And over time, I had to develop and open up to be able to notice things and understand that I genuinely want to understand this person. And it just blew my mind to know that everything around them is who they are. Like that warthog on your wall, it speaks to you, and it has a story. By the way, I do want to hear that story. But everything, and you just become so aware when you understand that everything we do, and I think you talk about this in another podcast about money is not the currency, but it's relationships and emotional relationships at that. And when you understand that and apply that to your life, and you talk about the businesses, how they're either failing or succeeding, and you can determine that now about what conversations are having, or more importantly, which conversations are not that need to be. And you just open your eyes to see that. Like when you are approaching the door and you see the garden, you see the tomatoes, you see the tricycles in the driveway. You know they have a relationship with their grandkids or somebody else in their family. And I've trained myself, and when you can understand that concept, to be observant. Like in my office, I recently got this because it's really important to me to have like symbols, especially like animal type things. I have in my office, it says dreams weigh more than excuses. And it's this forest. And then it's a seesaw. And on one side of the seesaw, it's this tiny little beautiful butterfly. And it's weighing it all the way down. And the other side is this massive elephant.
Yeah.
Right? And when you think about that and look at the beauty of the picture, and dreams weigh more than excuses, it just really opens up your mind to things like that. So coming on, Susan Scott, fierce conversations. Obviously, you're not afraid to have them, and you understand the importance of having them. And then seeing this boar/warthog behind you, it is, like I can imagine how important and powerful and graceful it is at the same time.
Yeah. You guys talked in one of your podcasts about how you just have to remind yourself you are a human being. You are a person. You are a human being. So is this other person. And there's this guy, and I've forgotten his name, but he comes up with words for things that there aren't words for. And he came up with a word.
Is his name Chris Ball?
I make up stuff all the time.
Isn't his name Mr. Webster?
Yeah.
No, he came up with the word Sonder, Sonder, and it is the sudden realization that every passing human being has a life as complex and as vivid as your own.
That's a great word.
With all their dreams and concerns and hopes and successes and failures and inherited craziness. And, they're just passing you by, and you don't have an awareness of that. And I remember before I got into this CEO thing, I was with a firm that placed support people. Back in those days, shows you how long ago it was, we called them secretaries and receptionists and office managers and all that. And I remember somebody saying, how can you stand to just interview secretaries all day long? And I was just stunned. It's like, what? I mean, each one of these people is a unique human being who has a story.
Yeah.
Everybody has a story, and I am so genuinely interested in those stories. I don't think you can fake that. I really don't. So I would hope that in the business that you're in, people really are interested in their stories and aren't just asking those questions as a way to get to the sale, which of course you want to do. But you're asking them because you're really asking.
Yeah.
And then you're really listening.
One of the things that we beat the drum on here, and we wear it on our wrists every day, it's this challenge to be difference makers. And
good.
We challenge our people to be one.
Yeah.
And it's all of our literature. It's in all of our communications, because for me and the core team here and for our mission, it resonates. Like what we wanted to do in life had to be more than making a widget that served a purpose, but we wanted to make an impact on families and to be able to leave legacies. It was more than that. And I put out a brief message to our team and our agents this morning, just on our internal Slack community. And I said, guys, we are in one of the best, one of the most honorable businesses in the entire world. We get to bless people with these products that protect families and is there for them at their worst day, so that their family is protected and safe, knowing that when you're gone, or when you're no longer able to provide in the way that you did, either with a living benefit or a death benefit, that person thought of you before now to ensure you were taken care of, you were loved, and we get to bless the family members that we never get to meet in most cases. And what an honorable career that is. And so when we walk into someone's home, we want to make sure that we see people as individuals, as people's lives that we can impact and be a difference maker to. And that is seeing them for who they are, but then being able to have a real conversation. I had and guys, I hadn't shared this story with you yet, so I'm sharing this story with you with Susan, okay. This morning. So one of our personal family friends recently through COVID, as a result of the pandemic that's gone on, found himself displaced and came out of the restaurant and food services business and was in the middle of just trying to find a new career. And his daughter and my daughter are really close, our youngest daughters. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, I don't know if this is going to be for you. I don't know if it's your skill set. And I know it's a complete departure from everything you've ever done. I said, but man, there's an opportunity over here for you if you'd like to come and take a look. And so he came and checked it out, decided to get licensed, went out and did some training with one of our unbelievable ladies that is just a great trainer. And she came back and she said, Rick is going to be really good at this. And I didn't tell him that until this morning, because this past week he kind of had a breakthrough week and he's putting up some really big numbers. And it seems like almost everybody that he's sitting with, he's gaining trust and he's actually helping them and writing applications. And I chatted with him and I said, what was the difference for you, Rick? He said, probably the difference was I was afraid to have those conversations beyond, when they would say, I want to think about it, or I wouldn't push through to get to the real reason. I was nervous about what the answers were going to be, and I guess I was insecure. I said, what changed for you? He said, the podcast that you guys did on tough conversations, the uncomfortable conversations that can change your career. We just recently did one, and it was really based on your books and based on this philosophy.
I thought it was excellent.
And he said, Roger, I implemented some of those things, and it has made all the difference in the world. I cannot believe how people are opening up to me now that I'm willing to cross that line with them and have a genuine conversation about what their real needs are for the family, even though I'm nervous about it. I can't let that nervousness hold me into that disingenuous conversation. In one of your quotes somewhere you said, it's not the uncomfortable conversations you should be afraid of. It's the meaningless ones that go on for eternity. That I think you quoted it as you quoted a book and said it's just babble being batted back and forth. These just words that mean nothing, and it should not be the uncomfortable ones that we're afraid of, but the ones that really don't move the needle.
Well, there's gold in them thar uncomfortable hills.
Yes,
that's really
and
good.
Stuff that you had suggested that I talk a little bit about our sort of we call it mineral rights conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
Would you like me to do that?
Yes, I wanted to say this was the biggest implementation piece of this for me. When I use little catchphrases for me when I'm sitting with a client, and it started to spill out with other agents. But the more I was able to be the ghost of Christmas future to them,
Yes.
to see the end result of the choices they were making, the more I couldn't take it away from them at that point because they saw the future. And so I started to pay more attention. It's a funny thing. You said this is a conversation that continues to happen, but I would get excited about this. I've read your book like 5 times. So, but I'd get excited about the this idea of interrogating reality, and then I'd say, okay, I'm going to do that. And then I realized, I forgot there's these steps to it, and start working through that process. But I just wanted you to see how I've implemented that a little bit. And if you could speak into that mineral rights, I think that would be awesome.
That's great. Chris, thank you for sharing that. I'm just always so, I don't know, grateful, humbled, happy, the difference that it is making for people in their lives. So mineral rights, which was named by somebody in one of our classes in the early days, and I'll explain that later. But it came about because when I first started out working with these CEOs, I thought, what the heck am I going to offer all these different industries? I mean, I don't know anything about their businesses and the idiosyncrasies of their businesses, so I'm not going to be saying, well, here's what you need to do. So I would, there's something about giving someone the purity of your attention right there, they start talking. So that is one of the greatest gifts you can give. So I'd walk in totally focused on the CEO, who would then just start talking and talking. I would take notes, all the different things that were happening in his or her organization. And then the next month I'd come back and I'd follow up on those things. And it was with one of my favorite CEOs who had a t-shirt company. He printed art on a t-shirt. And we had a wonderful time. Everybody in the group loved him. I loved him. We had great conversations. We both fly fished. We'd talk about that sometimes. We'd talk about his marriage, his daughters, his everything. And we get to the end of it, and I'm getting ready to leave to go to my next CEO. And he says, Suze, what if everybody who has the kind of t-shirts that we produce has all the t-shirts they want? And I said, what? And he said, well, how many of our t-shirts do you have? And I said, I got a drawer full, Mark. And he said, where'd you get them? And I said, well, you gave me some, but I've also bought some. Where did you buy them? Well, let's see. Front Street in Maui. My daughters and I, we each bought one of your t-shirts, and we wore them over our bathing suits, and we slept in them and everything. And he said, didn't you just get back from Maui? I said, yes. He said, did you buy any t-shirts? No. And he said, why not? And I said, because I don't need any more t-shirts. What the heck are we talking about? And he said, I think we're headed towards a really bad day. I think tastes in fashion are shifting away from what we do to something that we don't do. And I think we are very close to a really bad day. And I remember saying, why haven't we been talking about this the whole time? He said, well, I don't want to talk about it. It's too big. It's too complicated. I can't just turn this ship overnight. We have all these contracts with the artists who supply the art. We have the specialized equipment. We have, this is what we do. And I can't just flip a switch. So we took it to the group, and they did everything they could to help him, but he actually ended up selling his company about 6 months later and walked away with the t-shirt on his back and not much more. And that was devastating. And that's when I said, okay, I need to throw out my checklist. That is not always the most important thing that we should be talking about. So that's why the Mineral Rights Conversations has these sort of 7 layers of questions, and you give yourself a secret rule, which is questions only until you get way, 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 way down, past 7. And then you can make a declarative statement. And the first question, which is asked very ceremoniously, is I want you to think of everything that is on your plate, everything that has your name on it, and tell me what is the most important thing you and I should be talking about today. So in your scenario, it might be, I'm here to address what interests you or concerns you. So when you think about this insurance, what is the most important thing we should be talking about? What are your biggest questions or concerns or goals around this? And just hear what they have to say, and then you just take it from there. So I'll walk you through the model, and then I know that you can apply it to your business, because if I tried to do it all the way through on insurance, I think it would take me too long to put it all together.
You would definitely sell some apps.
Yeah. But, so they say, well, it's this, I'm concerned about this, or this is it might be a decision they need to make, or a problem they need to solve, or a strategy they need to design, whatever it is. And you say, tell me more about that so that I really understand. So, I'm concerned about what happens when I'm gone and my family, et cetera, et cetera. And you say more about that. So and then that's when you can go into some of your core stuff. You talk about family, children, family, and, tell me about your family, blah, 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 blah. So what is the situation right now in terms of their financial capabilities to take care of everything? When you leave us, what is their situation? What concerns you about that? What is it you want to accomplish? and let them talk and talk and talk. And what you should be saying mostly is, say more about that.
Yeah.
You know, what else? What else do you really want to accomplish? What else? And then, you know, the situation right now is blah, 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 blah. And when you look at that situation, what do you feel when you look at the fact that, you know, everything you've just described to me, when you look at that, what do you feel? By the way, just a little suggestion. I would replace how does that make you feel with what do you feel? Because we're so used to hearing people say, how does that make you feel, that it's cliched and it sometimes feels disingenuous. And nothing makes us feel anyway. That's a kind of a victim-y question. So just say, you know, when you've just described current reality.
Yeah.
And when you look at that, what comes up for you? What do you feel? So let's say they'll name, they might just say, well, you know, I'm a little concerned. Well, say more about that concern.
Yeah.
About that. Draw them out. This is what, you know, this is where you're trying to give the lit match something to ignite. And you've got to get them in touch with their own emotions around it. And so then you can go to, okay, if nothing changes, let's say I leave, no application, we're not trying to put anything in place for your family, what's likely to occur? What could occur down the road? Well, blah, 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 blah.
This is Chris Ghost of Christmas Future.
This is literally the process I go through. This is, it's funny, your instincts are so strong in this. Like, that is, yeah, what is... I love that question. What does that make you feel? You know, what are you feeling?
What do you feel?
What do you feel?
Yeah.
When you look at the possibility of, you know, your family trying to find the funds to care for you in the way they would want to, and to celebrate your life in the way they would want to, you know, what if they don't have that and they're struggling with that? You know, when you look at that possible scenario, what do you feel? And again, say more about that. What else? What else do you feel? And there's always what else? There's always something there until finally they say, well, there's nothing else. Okay. And then that's when you can say something like, I mean, in the traditional coaching model, it's what has been your contribution to this situation so far?
That's a great question. I've never asked that. That is boom.
What's been your contribution to this?
Yeah.
That's a challenging conversation.
Well, I had those kids. Now I got to take care of them still.
That's all I can save the money. Well, how's that been going for you so far?
Right. That is a question we ask.
So, but it might be what's been in the way of your taking the step that we're talking about right now.
Great question.
Because that's when you're going to get we can't afford it, or we this, or we that, or whatever, and say, I get it, I hear you. And I mean, I do think to say, I hear you is important, although that can be overused too. It's like one of you were talking in one of the podcasts about somebody saying, awesome, great, awesome, great, awesome, great. Yeah, my husband died. Awesome. I mean, it's like,
what?
No. but to say, you know, so what has been the stumbling block so far?
Yeah.
And whatever it is. And it might be if you're sitting there with a husband and wife and the husband's got his arms crossed across his chest, like Donald Trump, you know you've got an issue here. Maybe he's not on board or whatever. Who knows? Yeah. And so, you know, tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. And then you go to, okay, let's imagine that you have put into place something that will really take care of this issue, that will resolve it completely, so that now your family is well positioned to do the things that they will want to do on your behalf and on their behalf down the road when you're no longer here. Let's imagine that is in place. What difference will that make for you? Well, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know, what else? And when you look at that possible scenario, what do you feel? And so that is really important, because you've sort of taken them down into, you know, this is what's going on right now, and it's not good. And if I don't do anything about it, it will continue to be not good and maybe worse someday. You've got to rescue them now. Mm-hmm. So this is the way to do that. Once this is resolved, no longer an issue, no longer a concern, everything is in place. What difference will that make for you and your family?
It's like you're leading them. You have a fork in the road, and you walk down one path, show them the result. All right, let's go back. Then you walk down the other one, show them the result, and then you leave them at the fork to decide.
Asking them which one they most desire, which one they most want.
Yeah. And it's just, and again, say more, what else, and let them really just, I'll have the peace of mind. I won't be worried anymore. I'll feel really good about it. They'll be relieved. I can tell them that it's there so that they won't be wondering what else. And when you look at that, what do you feel? Oh, I feel, like usually what a CEO would say is, I feel like I need to do something about it right now.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then the final question is, okay, given everything that we just explored together, what do you see as the next step?
There seems to be a couple of important ingredients here, and I really kind of want to hear your take on this as the person who's walking a client through this. You're the person who's kind of the tour guide of the future here. And as you're doing that, can you talk a little bit about the importance of, as the tour guide, your conviction and your understanding of the results of that?
When you say conviction, what do you mean, Chris?
When you're talking to CEOs, this matters to you. It's important to you. Or otherwise you wouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
So, Chris, what you're saying is it's important to Susan.
Correct.
Right. Her message is important.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So can you talk about the importance of that conviction? Maybe conviction isn't the right word, but that's the one that's coming. Yeah.
Confidence.
Your belief in this. Mm-hmm.
Like when you heard me speaking, Susan, you heard me talking passionately about we're in one of the most honorable industries. It's life changing. We get to make it that conviction, that belief, self-belief that what we do matters. It is important. That piece.
Yes.
It is. And really, I mean, one of the things, and you guys mentioned this and the possible list of things to talk about today, the stump speech. Mm-hmm. And I think that each one of us, and if you want my stump speech, I'll send it to you, my personal stump speech. But I also have one for the company.
That's great.
I can send them both.
I would love it.
We would love that.
Share with anybody who's interested. But the stump speech answers 4 questions. The first one, the most important one, is where am I going? Well, actually, that's not the most important. The second one is even more important. Why am I going there? Mm-hmm. So where am I going with my life? And why? By the way, am I going there? Am I going there to get rich? Am I going there because I don't have anything better to do? Am I going there because my parents think I should go there? Am I going there because everybody else is going there? I mean, really, where am I going? Why am I going there? And your answers to these questions ought to give you goosebumps. Because if they don't, you're not there yet. You're still probably saying the things that you've heard other people say, which is not necessarily you. And then who's going with me? So in this case, it'd be, well, certainly my colleagues, my family, my clients with whom I'm establishing long-term relationships, or at least initiating a relationship. And then how am I going to get there? And those have to do with your values and the behaviors that are really important to you to live, not just talk about. And so I think as an agent, to your point, Roger, you are providing something that is so, so important. It makes a huge difference for families who have this in place. And so an agent who doesn't really have passion around where am I going and why am I going there, with this as a piece of that, they probably won't be as successful because they're not going to be as present even. I mean, I did a I don't know, it was a podcast or whatever it was. I've been doing a lot of these lately. And some woman said, well, should you ever show empathy? And I almost fell out of my chair.
Should you ever show empathy?
I know. It was, I had to just take a moment and say, yes, yes, you should. Because, I mean, there have been times when I have been sitting with someone going through mineral rights, and I've had tears running down my cheeks because of what they were saying. And I can't fake cry. It's real. It's real. I'm feeling what they're feeling, and they know it. And that, sometimes people say, this happens quite often. People will say, I can't believe I'm telling you this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always feel I can't believe you're telling me this either. And I feel so honored, so honored. And I know that people know there's always confidentiality involved. They know I'm not going to share whatever they tell me with anyone else. But that's what that happens with strangers on airplanes. I mean, we start talking and they bring up something that they're struggling with or problem they're solving, and we're right into it. We're right into mineral rights, and then I say, tell me more. What results is this creating for you? What do you feel when you look at those results? If nothing changes, what's likely to occur? When you look at that scenario, what do you feel? This is all in the book. So if somebody really wants to get good at this, I hope you'll get Fierce Conversations.
Absolutely. No question.
But it accomplishes a lot of the things that you have talked about that are so important to create that trust, to show up as the human being that you are, who recognizes you're in the presence of another human being who has a unique story to tell, and that you're interested in understanding their story. And I don't know whether it was the tomato people who sent you home with 2 jars of tomatoes where you spent 3 hours with them, but that 3 hours was precious.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I remember their names specifically because of how meaningful that conversation. Yeah, the Elgin family. I just spoke about them yesterday to a new agent.
Well, that's and I mean, they love you. They loved their time with you. They trusted you completely. And I know that they felt really, really good having you help them fill out that application and didn't balk when it got to, I need your Social Security and your driver's license.
Yeah. Well, and these are never easy. And the more trust you can establish and the more genuine and authentic you can be in your conversation with them, they open up. And just like you said, you're having these airplane conversations where people are opening up to you and sharing their things that they may have never shared with anyone. You find yourself, that's why some of these meetings go 3 hours, because they're sharing with you the things that are really important to them because you took the time to develop the conversation, to stay present, and to be meaningful.
And you know what? The mistake that a lot of people make is somebody says, I have this issue going on or this problem, and the person says, well, I have a solution. Here's what I think, and they just they don't even know if that's the real issue. That's the presenting issue, but there's probably much more beneath that. And we do an exercise at Fierce. We've done it several times so that we practice it. It's called listening on 3 levels. And so you have a volunteer come to the front of the room and talk for maybe just 3 or 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes about something that he or she feels strongly about. And then a third of the room reports out on what did they say, and be as verbatim as you can. A third of the room talks about, here are the emotions I detected. And the other third is focused on intent. What is it that you think this person is going to do as a result of what they have just said? And that's a really interesting one.
That's exciting to me. I'd like to get excited when I hear this stuff.
Pretty much we're going to be at one of these workshops with you doing these exercises. You're going to say, so Roger, it's your turn to do that thing we talked about. So come on.
I'll never forget this one guy who stood up there and he talked about he had just started a diet and how important it was. He wanted to lose weight, blah, 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 on and on and on and on and on. And so when he was done, this group said, this is what you said. Yep, that's what I said. This group said, well, these are the emotions I detected. Yep, you're right. And the other group, to a person, said, no, you're not going to do anything.
He's not going to do anything about it.
He was so angry. And on the next break, he went out and ate 2 fudge brownies.
They call it.
They were right.
Wow.
So I think just listening, you know, if you've ever watched Inside the Actors Studio or any of those interviews with actors, very often you will hear them say that they feel that the successful actors, their most important skill is listening.
Mm-hmm.
They have a script. They know what it is they're going to say, but they have to say it because they have listened.
Because they understand. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, you guys have a great plan for the things that you want to talk about and the points that you want to make and how to overcome objections and concerns and everything. But those should be in response because you have really listened at a deep level to what the person is telling you, and you keep inquiring and inquiring and inquiring. Mineral rights, they named it that because they said if you're going to, actually they were talking about water, if you're going to drill for water, you'll probably have more success if you drill 1,000-foot well than 1,000 one-foot wells.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so it's going deeper on that issue.
You know, one thing I was going to say about this, it kind of like popped into my head, apostrophe, but you can almost.
Your niece is famous, by the way.
Look at it.
I know she is.
Look at a correlation of what an agent company is trying to accomplish and where they are. If there's this, you know, they aren't getting the results or what they were looking at trying to accomplish. I mean, I'm not going to say this perfectly, but this connection and the willingness or the time they've put into doing this with themselves. Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
This mineral rights conversation, like I think agents struggle with having the tough conversation about where a client is and what they're trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not comfortable there. I mean, I remember saying to an agent, like, at some point you're going to get hungry enough to do it. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, I know when you decide you really want to sell something, you will actually ask these questions.
Yeah, but they haven't done the homework themselves of walking through this themselves of who they are.
Great if they had somebody take them through it.
Oh man,
or they take themselves through it. I do have several friends who every once in a while I'll say, I want you to take me through mineral rights on something, because sometimes, honestly, we don't know what we're thinking or feeling until we hear ourselves say it out loud.
Yeah.
And most people are not going to ask us the kinds of questions that will pull that from us. I want to share with you one story that illustrates a lot about what we have been talking about. Years ago, I was asked by an international consulting firm to come in and observe their training because they were having a problem. They were, a potential client would say, we may hire you. We're putting this out to, your competition as well. But here it is. And sometimes there were, hundreds of millions of dollars at stake in this sale. In one case, I remember, was over $1 billion.
Wow.
So the stakes are high, right?
Wow. Those are some high stakes.
I had one of those sits last week. It's not as big a deal as you guys think.
It's not as big a deal as you think.
I didn't see you close it.
Sorry.
They would pull in their best experts on whatever the topic was from all over the world, and they'd spend, a couple of months, and they'd prepare a solution. Here's the plan, and they'd go in and they'd pitch it, and the client would say, "Thank you very much," and hire the other guys. And this was a trend, and they didn't.
Wow.
I mean, it was a very expensive trend. Mm-hmm. It had to stop. So I went to observe their training, and they had about, I don't know, maybe 250 bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, mostly young men, straight out of college, who were so in awe of joining this huge, well-known international consulting firm and learning how to sell. And my heart just kind of sank as I heard what they were being taught, because there was such a missing piece, and we'll come to that. Their instructions were sell, close the deal, and they paired them up. So in twos, they would go into a room with a person pretending to be a client, And the client had always been given some kind of a script, and their job was sell, close the deal. And the very last one where you're hoping something really good will happen, the client script was, hey guys, before you begin, I should tell you, we've just been acquired. It'll be in the newspaper tomorrow. ABC company has just bought us. And so everybody's wondering what that's going to mean for them, because we don't know who's still going to be here 3 months, 6 months down the road. I'm the COO. I don't know whether they are going to want to keep me or whether they put somebody else in. So I just thought you should know that's what everybody's kind of preoccupied about that. And there was this beat, and I'm thinking, please God, please God. But one of the young men said, so does this mean our deal will be delayed? And we stopped it right then and there.
Yeah.
And the client said, let me ask you something. If you came home and your wife was weeping in the kitchen, is the first thing you would say, does this mean dinner's going to be late? So one of the things I'm so proud of our people at Fierce, when COVID kicked in, we didn't, obviously we want to sell. We have our goals, we have our break even, we have all of those things to contend with. But they were very clear that that's not, you need to check in with them, but it's not about trying to sell them. You need to say, how are you handling it? What's happening? Yeah. How's this affecting you? Is there anything I can do to help? We can do. And because of that, we're still doing business. We even won a huge contract with a new client, and our competition has headquarters in London and New York, and their marketing department has more people in it than our entire company.
Wow.
But they hired us because of the relationships that we had forged over time. In fact, they had said, the client had said, well, they have a really great PowerPoint deck.
Oh, man.
And we were thinking, okay, we can create a really cool PowerPoint deck. And that's not why you will want to work with us.
That's not our value.
That's not our value. And they just had these great conversations, and we won that contract. And so it's, whatever is going on with someone, stop right then and there and explore that.
Yeah.
What's happening for you, what's concerning you, what are you worried about, what are you hoping for, what are your stumbling blocks here, how are others in the family feeling about this, or have you even talked with them about it, and just really sort of move in with them. And I always would imagine when I would start working with anybody new client, I'd imagine that we were already really good friends and that we're sitting out in my backyard having a beer or a glass of wine and just, with our shoes off and just chit-chatting. That was always the way in which I talked with them. And so I could be flip, I could be funny, I could be irreverent, I could be all those things if I wanted to be, because that would be me. That's who I am. And they picked up on that. So they knew I wasn't there to sell them, I was there to help them.
I like the kind of scenario that you played out, and I think it's in your Fierce Conversations book, but you want to get to a point where you can go to someone's house, open the refrigerator, sit up on the couch, curl your feet up, shoes off, and have a real conversation. That's great.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And in fact, my granddaughters are both, one of them just graduated from college and the other will be a junior this year. They constantly have friends saying, can I come over? I need to talk to my boyfriend, or I need to talk to my dad, or I need to talk to my professor, and they will help them prepare to have that conversation. They are so fierce. They are so amazing. And so it's something that we want to teach our kids too.
Yeah. One quote that you have in your book of Pat Murray is, the problem named is the problem solved.
Yep.
And if we as agents never have the fierce conversations, then we're never going to name the problem or the reason that people know that they need, these products and these benefits for their family, and it's never going to solve. If you never have the fears conversation, you're never going to get the sale, and you're never going to protect that family.
Yeah, and I don't know, Chris, if you have the newer edition of my book that came out about 3 years ago, but I included in it the story about Beowulf, and the short version is, Beowulf in Denmark is hired to come in and fight this horrible creature named Grendel that's been coming into the mead hall every night and killing people, and he finally he manages to kill Grendel, and everybody thinks, oh, this is fantastic, now we can party again. And the next night, doors come off the hinges, and it's Grendel's mother. And she's very unhappy. Yep. And so long story short is, too often when we start a conversation and somebody says, this is what's going on, and we jump in with, well, let me tell you how to solve that. We don't even know if we've gotten to Grendel yet, much less his mother.
Grendel's mother, correct.
Yeah. And his mother may be just waiting to decapitate us. I mean, we don't know if we don't go into those deeper conversations, one question at a time, one genuine question. Again, you can't fake fears. And once you start doing it, you won't want to fake it because you'll love it, because it just takes you someplace you haven't been before and ends up with people truly trusting you and wanting to work with you.
Susan, one of, our listeners are, yes, they're dealing with clients for the most part, but they're also dealing with oftentimes an upline manager. They're dealing with someone who brought them into the business. They're dealing with an organization similar to the organization we have. Maybe it looks completely different than the one we have. They have goals and dreams. The manager or the leadership team has goals and dreams of how they're trying to move an organization. How are these conversations? What are these conversations looking like? And what are some suggestions that you have from both of those perspectives with relation to internal, not necessarily client-facing, but internal, based on goals, passions, dreams, objectives, and how to best accomplish those? Because some of those conversations are tough to have, especially if you have a strong leader and you have an agent with some dreams. That leader seems to be missing. How are some of those things approached? What are your suggestions there?
That's such a good question, Roger. And people ask that question in one way or another all the time. How do I talk with my boss or the person I report to, especially if there's something that isn't working for me? And that's where you can use the mineral rights format as sort of a way to prepare a pitch. Yeah. You can go in and you can say, hey, I want to talk with you about this, X. Here's what's happening for me right now. Here's the results I'm experiencing. And when I look at those results, it doesn't make me happy. I mean, it's disappointing to me. It's frustrating. It's concerning. It's embarrassing. And if nothing changes, what's likely to happen is my enthusiasm will wane and blah, 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 blah. On the other hand, if I can solve this with your help, then we've got a totally different scenario. And that's really what I want to accomplish with your help. And I wouldn't be talking with you about this if I didn't think there was a lot at stake to gain or lose based on our ability to work really well together. So, here's my request of you. It would be whatever it is. So I think sometimes I know that what makes any conversation stronger is when we use the words "what's at stake," because that's got an emotional kick to it. Here's what I feel is at stake: to gain, to lose. Yeah. I don't want to lose. I want to gain. I prefer this scenario to that scenario. And I know you do too. And so I'm feeling inadequate, thwarted, not heard, whatever.
Underprepared.
I feel that, I know that there's more that I could do on my own, and there's more that you could do to help me. And I mean, you just the worst thing that's going to happen is the response will be sort of a non-response. And okay, I don't have a good leader. I need to go elsewhere for my support and my help.
I know one mistake like I've made in the past is making assumptions about what people want and then communicating what we want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
say more about that, Chris. What's an example?
Well, like
you're using your strategy on him.
Well, I guess a good example would be a level of income per production that we want for an agent. That we're making an assumption about what they want and the amount of preparation and work they're willing to put into it, and there's a breakdown that didn't meet, but they were performing at a level that they expected from us versus what they really wanted personally.
So here again, this is where the stump speech comes in really handy. Where do you want to go?
Yeah.
Yes. Including what level of income would you like to earn?
Yeah.
In this work, and why? I mean, why is that important to you? What is it that you want to do with your income? Besides pay your mortgage and put food on the table and send your kids to school. I mean, what else is important to you? So to really understand that and have that is that's an important conversation. I mean, a lot of people want to come and work for us just because they like us, but they're not really clear about our mission and our vision, which are very important to us. And so we have to have those conversations and let them think about it and stew on it and come back to say, all right, I get it, I'm in, or I don't know that I really resonate with this piece. Sometimes there's plenty of room in an organization for someone who's a marginal performer, producer. I mean, it's like, okay, at least they're bringing in something. And I think you would say to that person, I get that you're happy with this level. And so I'm gonna leave you to it, wish you well. And you have all the tools, you know where to find the tools. I'm gonna go spend most of my time and energy with people who actually just want more, want bigger, greater, deeper, richer experience. And so I hope it's just because you've got what you want and you're sort of plateaued and you're cool with that. And I'm not here to try to motivate you. I'm not a motivational speaker. This is your conversation with self,
Yeah.
And if you're happy where you are and you're happy being sort of flatlined, and maintaining that, then that's cool. You go do that. Just don't keep coming back to. Here's the thing. One of the things that mineral rights would always end with was, okay, given everything we've just explored together, what do you see as the next most important step you need to take? And they would tell me, well, I need to do this. And I'd say, when are you going to take that step? What's going to try to get in your way? When can I follow up with you? And I'd follow up with them. And if they hadn't taken the step and they brought up the same issue again, I'd say, okay, I'm already starting to get bored with this.
So that's a real conversation.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, we've had this conversation. We went down that road. I invested all of my energy and attention and affection for you in this, and you said you were going to do X and you haven't, and now you're giving me the same sad story over again. So I'm kind of, it's really over to you. What are you going to do about it? We've been there, done that. And I just don't want to waste your time or my time. It's like a line from Bob Dylan, who I always loved. I'm not saying you treated me unkind. You just sort of wasted my precious time.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about somebody who keeps coming with the same thing. I remember myself contemplating a divorce many years ago, telling all of my office mates my sad story. And then one day I thought, what the heck is wrong with me? I'm telling the same story over and over again. It's not changing anything. It's not accomplishing anything. I need to shut up and make a decision, And I think so. If somebody wants to stay where they are and you're okay with that, if they're not doing any harm, then that's fine. Just tell them you're not going to invest yourself in them any longer.
Susan, so I want to see the slight nuanced difference, and this may be a deeper question, between that conversation as a subsequent one to the first, to marrying that with, I thought we already had the same conversation with my spouse, and we keep having the same conversation, but it's a series of conversations. So, like, I'm hearing this story, like, it's important because something is not being met. We like, I thought we had that conversation, and why are we revisiting that? Like, we did that once. We don't need to talk about it again for another 5 years. How is that different in this business setting, or is it a business issue versus someone willing to take action on what they said that they wanted?
I think it isn't different just because it's a business situation. If you and I have had a conversation, whether it's a business conversation or a personal conversation, and we've come to the post where, okay, what needs to happen? What would you like of me? What would I like of you? Timing and everything. And yet I'm doing my part and you're not doing your part, but you're complaining again. I'm going to say, I'm throwing in the red flag here. This is not cool. I care about you, and you've got to pick up your end of the load here. I'm not going to carry you. And so I'm doing what we agreed. I think I am. Let me know if I haven't been. There's something in the way of your doing what you've said you would do that you're not doing. Let's talk about that. What's in the way?
Yeah.
What is preventing you? Because I'm willing to have that conversation, but I don't want to have you come back to me next month with nothing, having done absolutely nothing about it.
Yeah.
And I think, we do have to have those tough conversations, whether people say, well, it's very tricky at home because you live with that person. Well, yeah. And we teach people how to treat us. And we get what we tolerate.
Yeah.
So whatever we're tolerating, we kind of deserve because we're tolerating it. And so if we decide, I don't think I want to tolerate this any longer, we need to make that clear. We need to say, this is actually a serious issue for me. It's really frustrating. I feel angry sometimes. I feel scared. I feel sad. I feel frustrated. I feel concerned, puzzled. I don't like feeling those things. I really don't. And so I need you to come on board if we are to resolve this. And that's going to take courage, perhaps. I don't know. Tell me what's in the way for you. Tell me, what is your fear? And there's almost always a fear there. But, I'm not a shrink. I am not a shrink. There's a hysterical little clip that if you go on YouTube and you look up Bob Newhart, and it says, "Stop it." Watch that video. Have you ever seen it?
No.
It's hilarious. Look up Bob Newhart.
Stop it.
And watch it. It's short. It's hilarious. That is my approach to coaching.
Great. We'll check it out.
And whenever somebody says, "Would you coach me?" I'll say, "Yes, but you need to watch this first," because that's how I do it.
That's how it's going to roll.
Yeah, that's how it's going to go. And if you don't want it to go that way, then I'm not the right person for you.
Yeah.
Well, I got to ask one more thing.
Go for
it.
I have
All
to.
right.
I've been waiting for it.
So, you want to know about the warthog now?
Yes, I do. I want to know why that speaks to you and why that's on your wall and why it's intentionally placed behind your Zoom calls.
I've spent time in Kenya on photographic safari the first time was with my granddaughter when she was only 9. And we had a young man named Zach, who I've since brought here, and he works for Boeing now. Yeah, Zach is a great name. And he was telling us how his warthogs were his favorite animal of all the animals, and they're so funny, and they're hysterical. The way they run around with their tails sticking straight up, and they're just very funny, and they're so ugly, they're adorable. And then I've been back to Kenya several times and supporting various people there. And I happened to I was really lucky to be doing some work in Paris, and I was wandering around, went down a side street, and that was in the window. of this artist, this woman who restores art, and that was in the window. And I had to visit her 4 times to talk her out of it at a price that I could even consider. And it just makes me think of all the wonderful times I have spent in Kenya. I mean, I feel that one of the greatest gifts we can give our children is to travel and to understand that there is more than one right way to live a life.
Yeah.
And I love animals. I have my crow is sitting out there in the grass staring at me right now.
My crow.
He wants his popcorn. And he has brought his entire family with him. I see all the little crows are out there too. I love animals. And I think, I just feel very connected to nature, and to be out in the Masai Mara, for example, and just watching during the migration, watching hundreds of thousands of wildebeests and zebras, they call them zebras, just moving across the terrain, being themselves, not self-conscious, having conversations with one another. Mm-hmm. It touches me in a way that is so deep, Zach. So that's why when I saw this warthog who looks very alive, I wanted to bring it home with me.
That's awesome. And if we ever go to one of your trainings, which hopefully we can for sure, I'm going to get a warthog t-shirt and I will wear that, so you'll know Zach Warthog. You'll remember me. It'll be perfect. I won't even have to wear a name tag.
That'll be great. Well, just know that, and I would say this for everybody who's listening to this, we are developing an asynchronous version of our training because not everybody has a company that's going to put them through it.
Do you mind explaining for our listeners what
asynchronous means? You don't have to have. A lot of our training is virtual, but it's facilitator led, so on a Zoom meeting. Asynchronous means you can take the training all by yourself with no facilitator anywhere you are, any time of day or night.
Love it. That's awesome.
There it is for you. And so we're almost through with that. And at some point, individuals such as yourselves or anybody else who wants to can go through the training. And that makes me really happy because I want to reach as many people as possible.
That's awesome.
Well, we're excited about that.
I'm going to give you a chance to talk about your other project that you're working on. But I want to say this. One of the things that I really appreciated in reading your books is they are very, you're just very human. They're very human. And it talks about, this idea of goal setting, ambition, tactical pieces. But there's this poetry in it. Like, you quote Bob Dylan, you quote other poets, and it's so complete. It's just such a human thing. And it makes sense to me when you told us that you have another book that you're working on. I was like, oh, it makes perfect sense because it's in line with that. So if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I will. I'm an English major, and I
okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
So I love good literature, and I tend to read that more than I read nonfiction. But yes, so for years and years and years, I've thought, no, there's still most people don't out there in the world, just individual men and women don't know about fierce conversations. They've never been exposed to it, and yet it could make a huge difference for them in their love life. And so I'm writing Fierce Love, and it's focused on the conversations that are really important for two people who love each other or want to love each other or used to love each other and like to get it back, or who don't love anybody and are not real happy about that, or whatever. What are the conversations that are going to create such a rich, loving relationship? And so it's not about love of dogs and love of country. It's about two people. So that's what it's about. And I've been taking notes. I'm embarrassed because I've been talking about this for so long, but now I'm actually writing it because my CEO is saying, I need this and I need this now. It's like, oh. All right. So I'm really having a good time with it. And I think it will be so helpful out there just to everybody.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Susan, I know we're getting ready to wrap. One of the things that stood out to me that I'd like to conclude with and just to say thank you for, and it was it made such an impact. And I watched this with my daughter, my middle daughter, Olivia, who's an art major, and she's going back now to do art therapy. She wants to speak to people and help people with challenges through, art and using, other forms of expression to deal with those things. And we watched this together. And when we were done, she said, "That was so good, Dad. That was so good." You talked about radical transparency. Came from your TED Talk. You said it's not for those who want to be in the shadows in the crowd. It's for those who are willing to tackle our toughest challenges, who are willing to set aside the old corporate ways of communication and to execute with a much higher level of integrity, both personally and professionally. And this statement is the one that got me. You said, my hope is that you will sit beside someone you care for and begin.
Yes.
And I thought about all the people in my world that I need to sit with and begin again. And so thank you. Thank you for the gift of your talent to the world. We appreciate it.
Welcome, Roger. You're so welcome. I just thank you for inviting me, because I love talking about this. And honestly, sometimes I think my book could have been titled A Complete Guide to the Freaking Obvious, but it's not obvious. Right. And so there it is. And when I think back, nobody taught me how to have these conversations. So that's why we exist.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been incredible. Just to hear your experiences and your stories. You are a great storyteller.
Oh yeah, you are.
From just reading the book, and I was just like, the detail that you put, that just it comes alive. I'm sitting right next to her listening to this conversation.
Well, that is my final remark will be that my favorite visual for a fierce conversation is a campfire. Mm-hmm. And I do have a treehouse on Orcas Island off the coast of Washington State, and there's a fire pit, and all I have to do is start a little fire when friends and family are there, and they start showing up because they smell the smoke, they hear the crackling of the logs, and they come and they add their logs to the fire, and it gets bigger and bigger and more beautiful, and we sit around it and we tell our stories. Mm-hmm. And that's what a fierce conversation is. It's warm, it's crackling, it's powerful, it's passionate, and it's full of our stories, our real stories, not the ones that we think are going to impress people, but our real stories, including all the places where we're messing up. And that's where we can be real with one another, come out from behind ourselves. And when we do that, there's the connection at the deep, deep level, which is what I think life is all about. So, and my hope for all of you is that you will sit beside someone you care for and begin.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode. Man, what an amazing discussion. If you want to start your journey on fierce conversations, we definitely recommend checking out some of Susan's books. She has TED Talks. We're going to link all of the books, all the resources that we discussed today, some of the stories she shared, the stump speeches, the mineral rights steps on the show notes page. That's at liapodcast.org/EP29. That's liapodcast.org/EP29. And you'll be able to see all the resources there. But more so, we're going to do a book giveaway to get you a copy of Susan's book in
You're
your
welcome,
hands.
America.
Oh, my goodness.
You're welcome.
You are.
And so all the instructions for that will be on the show notes page as well as on our social media. So definitely check that out. We'll catch you on another episode. Stay safe and go be a difference maker.